We've got, moving into the afternoon session, we've got a speaker here who I seen last year in London, a sensational speaker. He's very rock and roll, although he's a Liverpool fan. And I'm sure you're really going to enjoy the presentation. From the London School of Economics, please put your hands together for Nigel Dodd. Hang on, he wants the mic now.
Thanks very much. Nice to be here. My first job was, I've broken the mouse already. First job was in Liverpool. And I left in 95, and I realised on my way from Limestone, I've not been back since. This area hasn't changed, I can tell you. Right, I wanted to start by showing you this, this is a video, some of you might have seen it already, recently, Financial Times video, about gold.
You've got some worse problem of dispersal, both of cyanide and of mercury, into the environment.
But the potential danger of gold goes beyond its polluting attributes. It also poses risks to the financial system itself. For sociologist Nigel Dodd, gold's financial attraction is actually a bit of a mystery. He thinks it's a poor form of money precisely because of its antisocial properties and propensity to encourage selfishness. Gold, he says, undermines the fundamental point of what money should be, a reflection of a society's capacity to share.
One of my favourite social thinkers about money was a guy called George Simmel, and he talked about how there's the kind of paradox with money, that it's a measure of everything and yet it's never still, it's always moving, it's never constant. A society wants to anchor itself to gold partly because it's difficult to cope with money's relativity. There is no still centre to money if you understand it properly.
It's a counterintuitive argument which even the greatest minds in history have struggled to communicate. Take Isaac Newton, the physicist and alchemist. As Warden of the Royal Mint at the Tower of London, he oversaw Britain's first flirtation with a gold standard. But the move inadvertently overvalued gold in Britain, leading to a financially destabilizing run on the nation's silver reserves. Newton knew this would happen, but he couldn't convince the established elite that devaluing gold would be the better option.
I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people.
But for Nigel Dodd, there's another issue. Gold also expresses a wastage of human potential.
On the one side, gold clearly appeals to people as a way of displaying the fact that they've got more than they need. So there are very famous descriptions of gold as a form of superfluous wealth. So we love to gold plate our phones, our toilets. It's a great display jewel. You know, as gold looks spectacular when you coat things in it. But there's also a really interesting psychoanalytic literature on gold, which suggests that actually gold is a form of sublimation, and that what gold really is human waste, to put it nicely, and that there's this connection between people that are very attached to their money, very attached to their wealth, and people that don't like to get rid of their own waste. So gold is effectively poo that's made to shine, is probably the politest way of putting it. And so in that sense, you know, if you're in love with gold, you're in love with your own poo.
Well, I was joking, right? But a bit of a Twitter storm. First, the friendly response. The ever smart Nigel Dodd, thank you, uses shit constipation as a complex metaphor for gold hoarding. I liked that one. The next one, we were excited. This was the Currency Guild, you guys. We were excited to have Nigel as a keynote. Here he's talking about gold and poo. You notice no one mentioned Simmel or Isaac Newton. It was just the shit you went for. Lower the tone, won't we? Move on. Here we go. So here's the gold bug started on. And Ned Leyland, anyone with a double-barreled name is an enemy of mine. Wow, several villages evidently missing persons of interest. Ha ha ha. Statism comes in many ugly forms, breathtaking idiocy. And then we go on. I'm sure that this person runs a blog about gold. He calls himself Turd Ferguson and is somehow offended by the comparison I made between gold and shit. He's an American, therefore lacks any irony in his entire being. So he wrote this, and then he got very. This is his blog. He got must-watch video. That I think is sarcasm rather than irony, technically. And here he goes. Sexist, poor Isabella, who's a brilliant writer for the FT. Some of you will know her. The Money Shot. Thank you. It says, the money shot from Isabella, but the potential danger of gold goes beyond its polluting attributes. This is just quoting her. It also poses risk to the financial system itself. And then this is his description of what I said, but it gets better, much better, he says, sarcastically. This is from sociologist Nigel Dodd. Gold is a poor form of money, and it just repeats what I've said. And then he says, and if that quote alone doesn't remind you of why you should never take investment advice for your brother-in-law who never left college, that's me, and who prefers to live in utopian fantasy land, yes, that's the LSE. The next bit of wisdom from Mr. Dodd takes the proverbial cake. Gold expresses the wastage, and it goes on what I've said. So then it ends by saying, well, I don't know about you, but suddenly all this makes sense for me. Thank you, Mr. Dodd. I am Turd Ferguson. Now I know why I instinctively chose a pseudonym. I'm an internet analyst of my own poo. To which I can only say, yes, you probably are. And then comes what I think is the key to his argument. That was my... all joking aside, if this video doesn't represent the prevailing mindset of the end of the great Keynesian experiment, I don't know what does. Gold is hoarded by selfish, frightened sociopaths. Yes, it is. It's dangerous to Mother Earth and society. Have faith instead in the system where confidence and fiat cash flows freely like the fresh mountain stream. And then I had even some hate mail. This raised the level of by a guy called Christopher Marsh with a French email address who just said arse wipe, which my kids enjoyed that particularly. I was on holiday when I received that in the Lake District, so that was nice. So anyway, this is and then we come to the next stage. I'm showing you this because I think it goes to the heart of many of the confusions that prevail in today's society, today's world about the nature of money. And so the Bitcoiners got in on the act too and said, we need to get those gold bugs to convert to Bitcoin, which would really not be a big move, to be honest, to go from Bitcoin to gold, because the common belief amongst the Bitcoin community is in fact that Bitcoin is effectively gold 2.0. Why am I saying this? Because the gold bugs, who are vicious, some of the hate mail that Isabella received for that video, which is actually well worth seeing, it's a very good video, made ages ago. I didn't honestly think they would use the poo stuff. I was doing it as a joke, and we were all laughing as I was doing it. Although it's a established line in Freudian psychoanalysis that gold is a form of sublimated shit, but that's not the issue. What they were offended, and they regard gold as an investment vehicle, and they regard the role of the Financial Times to promote gold as an investment vehicle, and anything they say should be increasing the price. And lawyers did get in touch with the Financial Times to try to get this video stopped. So it's quite a serious business. Bitcoin too is a serious business, and it's going through a serious change this year. And I think it's interesting that one of the main selling points of Bitcoin, according to its supporters, is that it's like gold. And we can discuss why that might be the case. Now, if you see the video carefully, you'll see that the fundamental argument the video is making isn't about whether gold's a good investment vehicle or not. It's about the nature of money and whether gold and things like gold serve society well when used as money. And the answer, of course, is no, they don't. And they don't because we think of them as having thing-like properties. And money is not a thing. Money is a fundamentally social process. And unless we understand that, we're going to misuse it, mistreat it, and be badly treated by it. This goes to the heart of the politics of austerity. The idea that money is a thing that has intrinsic value that needs to be stored up and protected, like gold, is very common in the discourse of the Tory party. One of the frustrations I had during the recent election was this common analogy that I remember Thatcher first using it years and years ago between the national economy and a household budget. And it's a very easy argument to make, the idea that there is only so much money in the economy. And when we run out, we have to cut our cloth. And the only way to do that is to make corrosive public expenditure cuts. And so you have statements like this: Labour maxed out the nation's credit card. It's a very, very common misconception, and it's an analogy which serves the right extremely well. And so there is a serious point here. There was a very good blog recently by Mary Mellor in The Independent, and she referred to this as Handbag Economics. And she took us through the arguments very, very well. The idea is preposterous that somehow a national economy can be compared to a household economy because there is a finite amount of money in circulation. That's not how money works. And so the main message of the talk I want to give today is to try to show how local currencies have a very, very important role to play, not in necessarily enhancing the local economy, not in terms of some local money multiplier, not necessarily measurable significance. I think that one of the biggest things that a local currency can do is re-educate people, show people how money works in practice, and to demonstrate to people that money is a fundamentally social process. And if we treat it like that, we can make a huge difference to people's lives, not necessarily in ways that can be measured within the kind of neoliberal audit society that we live in. The amount of public ignorance about money is quite staggering. And it's not only public ignorance, it's ignorance amongst specialists. This question, what is money, usually elicits the wrong answer. And it is the wrong answer, because most people would say money is like gold, it's analogous to gold, it has some sort of inherent value that needs to be protected, and if it's not protected by nature, as in the case of gold, it needs to be protected by software, as in the case of Bitcoin, or by the state, or a regulator, or a central bank. There's a song by a group that people may have heard of called Enter Shikari, called the Bank of England. Enter Shikari are a bit of a, you want to rock and roll, you get it. They're a kind of metalcore band, and they're in the US at the moment. They do pretty well. They sold out Ali Pali in London, which is 10,000. And I was there, and they sing this song, Bank of England, on their most recent album, which came out last year. And in this song, it has a great line that they would like to blow up the Bank of England. And with the paper, it says, would burn for days, and that's obviously wrong, because there's very little paper in the Bank of England. That's money anyway. There's an awful lot of paper being pushed around, but it isn't money. And the idea that this is where money comes from in the UK is completely wrong as well. So I got in touch with the lead singer of the group, a guy called Raoul Reynolds, and invited him to my office in the LSE. And one of the benefits of working for the LSE is that people say yes, and so he came. The poor guy, I had him strapped to a chair for 3 hours and gave him a thrashing and a lecture on money. So you've only got me for 30 minutes. So you should be grateful. And I told him that, if he wanted to bring down the monetary system, the Bank of England wasn't the right place to torch. He should just go down to his local banks and torch those instead. So I think he's working on it alongside his... but of course, as we know, our MPs are equally ignorant. It's not just our rock stars that are ignorant, it's our MPs. Lots of MPs think that money comes from the Bank of England because they look at their banknotes and they think that that's what money is, and they don't realise that most of the money in circulation, it's not even properly in circulation in the UK, actually comes from private commercial banks in the form of debt. And of course this is the argument that's often pursued very, very vehemently and very strongly by the Positive Money organisation. It's not only MPs that get this wrong. Most economics students get this wrong too. I've been talking in places where I put this slide up to business school students, economics students, even students at the LSE. And now and again, I could have put up a picture of a turd, in fact, because the gasps of astonishment, like, what are you talking about? Do you not understand money? And economic students do tell me that they're not taught anything like this. They're taught pretty much a theory which is entirely consistent with the idea that central banks produce money. In fact, what they're taught is more akin to this. And I was reading Harry Potter on my way up because it's essential reading for any theorist of money. There is a theory of money in Harry Potter. In fact, there are two forms of money. I could go on about them at great length. There's the normal money, which is the gold, and then the little silver coins and the nuts, the bronze ones. And this really is the image of money that prevails in mainstream neoclassical economics. Economists do believe in magic. There is no doubt about that, and here's the proof. And they do believe, and they teach their students, that money is sort of dug up from the ground, either really or metaphorically, and that the money we have, even if it's printed on paper, represents this money that's dug up from the ground, and that it does indeed need to be protected by very wily goblins, who are nasty little bastards, otherwise known as central bankers, and dragons, otherwise known as financial regulators, who breathe fire. And this is the belief system that a lot of students go around with. And even Paul Krugman, who I would say is on the side of the angels just, thinks that money's a bit weird. And this is him in a blog last year or the year before, where he says money is really weird. And you think, well, in what way? Is it green? Is it like, does it go flash? Does it smell strange? Does it taste funny? No, money is weird because it's a social contrivance. Well, thank you, Paul. It took a Nobel Prize-winning economist to tell us that money is social. And I'm sure every single person in this room knows that. So there you are. You're brighter than Paul Krugman, if only you were paid as much. Oh, this isn't working suddenly. What's gone on? My mouse is failing me. Right, so let's go into the economic theory of money and get to grips with some of this. Economists are taught this: money is a medium of exchange, a medium of account, it's a store of value. The confusion about money is between 1 and 3 in that list. Most people confuse the idea of money as a store of value with the idea of money as a medium of exchange. In fact, they think that 3 is a prerequisite to 1. And if you don't have 3, 1 will fail. Even 1 is problematic in terms of monetary theory for reasons I'll go on to explain right now. But a lot of the excitement about Bitcoin, for example, is excitement about 3. People focus on the price of Bitcoin and how that rose phenomenally in the first few years and how it's gone down since then. And when people talk about the failure of Bitcoin, they talk about its price. They talk about Bitcoin as a store of value. And when they talk about Bitcoin as Bitcoin 2.0, as gold 2.0, they again talk about Bitcoin as a store of value. They don't really talk about the success or failure of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, and they certainly don't talk about the success or failure of Bitcoin as a medium of account. History of money plays to this too. If you go to most central bank websites and you look up the section on the theory and definition of money, you'll find this story. And it's the barter theory of the origins of money. And the story runs roughly like this: that once upon a time, we were all hairy, and we went around in loincloths, and we couldn't really speak, but we'd say things like gubba, 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 and we'd exchange stuff. I would exchange a fish for your primitive bicycle, and vice versa. And that wasn't very efficient, so money sort of came along somehow, spontaneously, through the market, and everything was fine. That's the story that economists are taught, and that's the story that most central banks, like this one, and also this one. It's the classic story about the origins of money. Now, this still prevails in many economics textbooks. It still prevails in many popular books about money and economics. The alternative, and it still prevails, for example, in the Daily Telegraph. This is a very nice graphic that they showed last year or the year before, all about barter and how barter, the inefficiencies of the barter economy. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is because the barter economy is about money as a commodity. It's the idea that money came into being through market exchange as a commodity with value. And that supports the whole ideology that money is best served by something like gold. It's against the idea that money is a social relationship first and foremost. And that's barter still appeals. This is a slide I showed to students. I won't go through it in detail. The other side of the debate about the origins of money is that money actually originates as a form of payment, as a way of settling debts. And so it's rooted in social obligations, it's rooted in moral obligations, it's rooted in relations which are unequal, and it's rooted in relations which last over time. And that's probably the crucial thing that distinguishes the two theories. Barter is a spot transaction. It takes place out of time. There is no lasting relationship where barter is concerned. So a theory of money that appeals to that is a theory of money which is somewhat lacking in any kind of social finesse. Money as a form of debt is rooted in a much longer term relationship. And this is the alternative theory of money that you won't find very often on central bank websites, although the Bank of England has, in the last couple of years, conceded that there might be some truth in it. Most of the archaeological and anthropological evidence, incidentally, supports this theory. Money is fundamentally a form of debt. But here it gets complicated, and I haven't got that much time to go through it. If you start thinking of money as a form of debt, John Ruskin, for example, said, all money properly so called is an acknowledgement of debt. If you start talking about this, then you soon run into this moral problem. And that is the idea that debt is something bad. And if money is connected to debt, there's something wrong with it. And here you come to all sorts of confusions. So, for example, I've mentioned positive money. And one of their arguments is that money, when it's issued by commercial banks as a form of debt, there's something problematic about that, and that we need to take it back to the central bank. So there are a lot of confusions around the relationship between money and debt that I think you might want to discuss here. Debt is something which isn't very popular, above all post-2008. This wasn't a real ad, I wish it was. I wish Wonga had said, fuck me. It would be very clever psychological advertising. But they didn't. When I first saw it, I thought, wow, I'll get a Wonga loan just for this. But I realized that although the percentage figure's correct, the fuck me bit isn't. So I didn't take them up on the invitation. But we think of debt as something bad. We think of debt as something negative. We think of debt as something corrupting and corrosive. So the idea that money is gold, that it's a commodity, not only appeals to people because intuitively it sounds like that's how money should be, but also it's against the alternative idea that money is a form of debt. And we think of debt as something bad. So there's a kind of pincer movement on the theory of money. On the one side, the idea that money is a commodity appeals to people because it appeals to the Gringotts mentality, that it's something we should protect. On the other side, it's against a theory of money as debt, which people don't like, because they don't like debt, and they think that money that's is a form of debt is something wrong with it, because there's something wrong with debt. And you'll find a lot of the discourse around positive money, a lot of the supporters around positive money do tend to support positive money because they see it as kind of anti-debt. There's a lot of confusion around this. I think the confusion could be ironed out by going to one of my heroes, someone I mentioned in that FT video, Zimmel, who describes money as a claim upon society. What I want to suggest, we haven't got long, what I want to suggest is that money is a form of debt, but it's a very, very particular, specific, socially extensive form of debt. It's a claim upon society. Society can be defined as a national society. It can be defined as a local community. It can be defined in virtual terms. It can be anything. But it's a claim embodied in some kind of token or some kind of electronic form. It's a claim upon a group of people owned by one person. That's what it is. In that sense, money is a form of debt. And in that sense, it's better understood in terms of the whole theory of debt and the origins of money on that side. Where do local currencies fit into this? Just to cut a long story short, local currencies appeal partly, I think, because they focus our attention on the nature of that claim. They focus our attention on the relationship between the individual that uses money and the community in which it's used. Now, local currencies do this by focusing on the local economy, but there are lots of other ways of doing this. It doesn't have to be a local community. It appeals to me because it counters this kind of discourse that we still get, that there's something intrinsically bad about money. This was something that came out of the financial crisis. It's rooted in classical social thought. It goes all the way back to Marx, Weber, Nietzsche, who all thought that there was something corrosive and nasty about money. Local currencies show, I think, that money can be nasty, and it can be corrosive, and it can be like acid, but it can also be something which enhances our experience. Even the Pope, this guy, buys into this theory. My mouth has gone completely crazy. Buys into this idea that there's something intrinsically bad about money. I don't know why I put that, I just really like it. So I thought, I'll give them that, and I'll think of something witty to say when it comes out. I can't think of anything witty to say other than shut up and take my money. I also like this one, because this to me emphasizes not only that money is a process, but that even a kid this age can understand that. It can't be that tough. But I want to focus on one aspect of local currency that I think is important, and which I'll have to end with, and that is the idea of money not only as something you buy things with, but something through which you relate to people. This has come out, I think, in my own experience of going to Bristol, going to Brixton, going elsewhere, and using local currencies and experiencing what it's actually like. And I can't say I experienced this in Brixton. I wouldn't dream of hugging anybody in Brixton, but this is unless they're called Tom or Charlie. But other than that, I wouldn't. But this is Heidi Hinder, who's an artist in London. I think, no, maybe she's in Bristol actually. I don't know where she's based, but anyway, she did this rather wonderful idea of hug and pay. And she was trying to get into the idea that we need to warm up our experience of using money, that money is somehow more like this and needs to be more like this. And I featured this in a few talks I gave about money when my book came out. And above all, my colleagues at the LSE thought I really had lost it when I put Heidi up. Heidi was delighted because she likes to see herself on slides like this. But the idea that she came up with is, instead of paying people with money, we could just give them a hug or whatever. And people just said, okay, Dodd's lost it, he's finally lost the plot. It didn't take that long. 20 years at the LSE, he's gone. But then, of course, this turned up, which was last year on Valentine's Day. McDonald's, the enemy, decided that a way of celebrating Valentine's Day would be, instead of using money, you could give people a hug. So you go and get your Big Mac, you know, your 8,000 calories, 2 a.m. with a belly full of beer. I'm sure one or two of you will do it tonight. And at some point, your number will come up. And the person will say, look, you know, you don't have to pay for this 8,000 calories. You're going to die anyway. Just give the person next to you a hug, and you can have it for free. And this was very popular. And give loving, get loving, which is, I guess, it's a variation on the Wonga fuck me idea. But then Pret also, which is do you have a Pret in Liverpool? I'm sure you do. They also do this thing where instead of buying your coffee, the staff are instructed to give coffee away to 5 lucky customers every day, and you can give it away for any reason. You might fancy somebody who comes in there every day and you say, oh, you know, this one's on the house, which is meant to be flirtatious, but I don't think it worked, did it? So I've been talking about this, and I've now gone into Pret every single day. Going like twice I've got a free coffee. Both of them off guys, which is a bit of a disappointment. But it was nevertheless a nice experience for me to get a free coffee. But I went through a hell of a lot of coffee to get one. Like, oh, it's your 100th time in here today, sir. You can have it for free. Now, fuck off. Was more or less my experience. The point here, though, that I'm trying to make is that these were attempts to warm up the monetary transaction. The significant thing in both cases is that the only way that these corporations could think of warming up a monetary transaction is to get rid of money. In both cases, they were warming up a transaction by saying, okay, effectively you can go back and we can barter rather than using money. And what I enjoy, and I would like to encourage you to think about in relation to local currencies, is that you can warm up the experience of money not by getting rid of it, but by transforming it and by reforming it. And it's at this level, the micro level, that I think money is due for change. And it goes all the way back to the idea of money as a process. It goes back to thinking of money not as a thing, not as a bit of gold, not as a bit of value that sits in a bank that we need protecting by goblins and fire-breathing dragons, but money as a social relationship which lasts over time, which isn't simply spot. So at the heart of this is a fundamental difference in view that goes all the way back to Aristotle about the nature of money in relation to time. And this is what's important. And I like, and I'll finish here, the way in which this happens. We start with this, which really reminds me of that arsewipe email. It looks as if this has been indeed gone through such a process, that the £10 note in all of its disgusting glory. I'm not sure if this is the current one. I don't really use cash much myself. And then we have the euro. There's a great story. Now, the euro bridges, you know why they did bridges, right? They did bridges because they wanted to symbolize friendship. But you know these bridges are made up, right? And you know why they're made up? Because when they started discussing which bridges to put on the notes, they fought like cat and dog. And they said, no, I want my fucking bridge. No, And so to stop the Third World War in Europe, they made up these bridges. So all of these bridges are invented. They're generic architectural bridges. But some guy in Rotterdam, some bright Dutch guy who was probably had far too many cakes from some cafe in Amsterdam, decided to build these bridges. So you can indeed see the euro bridges in Rotterdam, and I'm not kidding. Just Google it and you'll see. So these bridges do exist as an art exhibition in Rotterdam. Incidentally, do vote yes to staying in Europe, but like, what a joke. And then you come to this beauty, the Ziggy. And this is my favourite note in the world. And I know the Brixton people are here, but I love this. I love it. Well, I love it even more than this, which is their fiver. And Charlie gave a great, I don't know if Charlie's speaking at this, if he isn't, just put him on. He gave a great talk last year at the Brixton conference where he talked about the experience of standing in a queue behind someone holding one of those. but instead holding one of these. And the point he made, and I hope I'm not stealing his thunder in any way, but the point he made was, it feels so much better if you're standing in a queue waiting for your coffee, holding one of those. But it also leads to a better, more rounded social experience. And I think it does matter how we use money, not simply that we use it or where its value comes from. So my message really about local currencies is it's not simply about measuring their impact using flashy economic statistics invented by dodgy organizations like NEF, Duncan. It's more a question of, or also a question of thinking about these things in qualitative terms, thinking about how they enhance people's experience of money. Not only how they enhance people's experience, but how they counter their ignorance about money. They lay things bare in a way that few forms of money do, and I think that's the big lesson that I would like you to take from what I've said today. Thank you very much for your patience in listening.